Okay, welcome back. As I mentioned in the last video, we have one more exercise just to get some more practice with the command line and running files with Node, as well as brushing up some of those basic JavaScript skills. So again, I've typed up the instructions. Feel free to read them and just go over it on your own, but I'll also walk through them step by step. So the first thing you need to do is create a new file called grader.js. The idea behind this exercise is that you are a teacher teaching a class and you have a bunch of test scores, and they're in an array, and you want to find the average score in the array. So you're going to define a new function called average inside of the new file, and that average function should take a single parameter, an array of test scores, which are all numbers between 0 and 100. And then the function should return the average score in the array, but it should be rounded to the nearest whole number. So no 93.3421 blah blah blah, it should just be 93. Here are two examples that you should copy into your code and make sure that they work. So the first one, we have some scores that are a little higher, and the second one, some more negative scores. And the first one should return 94, and the second one should return 68. Just a hint about rounding to the nearest whole number. You don't need to do that yourself. There's no fancy logic you need to do. There's actually a special method on the math object that will help you. So do a little research on that. As always, pause the video, give this a shot, and I'll be back with the solution. Okay, let's get started. First of all, we need to make a new file called grader.js. Just like that. Make sure it worked. There it is, grader.js. And then we need to define a function, average. And average should take an array of scores, so we'll just call it scores. And I'm going to copy these two test cases to the very bottom, just so I have them. So we pass in an array of numbers, and to find the average of something, we're going to need to take every element and add it together, and then we'll need to divide by the number of elements. So that can be first, add all scores together, and then next would be divide by total number of scores, and then lastly, round. Okay. To add all the scores together, we need to loop through the array and have a variable that we're adding each number to. And this is something called the accumulator pattern, where we have a variable that is going to accumulate something as we iterate through an array or a collection. So in this case, it will accumulate a total. So we'll define a variable called total and start it at 0. Then we loop through scores. So to do that, we could use a for loop, a while loop, or my favorite, a for each. So I'll do a for each, scores.for each function, and we'll just call it score as our placeholder variable. Each one of these is going to be named score, and then we just do a total plus equals score. So this would work to go through the array, and it adds everything together. The next thing that we need to do is divide by the total number of scores. To do that, let's make another variable called average, or AVG, equals total divided by, and the number of scores is just scores.length. And then the last thing here is to round it, which is math.round, and we want to round AVG and return that, just like that. Math.round is one of those built-in methods like math.floor or math.rand. And unlike math.floor, which will just chop off the decimal point, math.round will round up or down depending on the decimal. Okay, so let's walk through this again. We pass in an array. It's called scores. We start a total variable at 0. We loop through the scores using a for each in this case, but we could use any other type of loop. And then we add each score into the total. And then we divide the total by all the scores, scores.length, and that set that equal to the AVG variable average. And then we math.round average, and then we return that. So if we run this now, save, and we run node.grader or nodegrader.js, we have a small problem, not with our logic, but in that we have no idea if this worked. And that's of course because we're only returning something. I never told you to actually print anything out. So what we could do is either console.log this here. That's probably the best way, so that we don't actually change our function. It still returns. and we'll just console.log the result, just like that. There's the first one, and now we'll console.log the second one. And we're hoping to get 94 and 68. And let's add a message here to make it clear. So console.log, this will be average score for environmental science, which when I took it was extremely easy. The average was probably higher than 94. And then we'll do another one here, console.log average score, and this will be for organic chemistry, where the average score in a test was probably much lower than 68. So let's save and now run that again. Just hit the up arrow and hit enter. And we get 94, which is what we expected, and 68, which is also what we expected. So that's it for these quick exercises. The next thing we're going to do is learn about something called NPM, Node Package Manager, and that will put us one step closer to writing our server-side logic and making full-stack web applications. Right now, we're just writing these simple functions inside of a file and running them. But once we learn more about NPM and talk about some of the packages we're going to use, we'll actually start writing full applications.